All right, welcome back to the You Can For You podcast, where old school values have a modern edge. And before we get started, I want to give a huge shout out to the Vertigo Center, helping you find balance when the world won't stop spinning. So if your loved one is suffering with balance, dizziness, or vertigo, please contact thevertigocenter.com today to take your first steps towards steady living. Justin, how are you?
I'm fantastic. How about you?
I'm doing great, man. Thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely.
I just want to start. Tell us about Project 55.
Yeah, so Project 55, we weren't all that creative in our naming convention, but it's really a nonprofit that is geared towards providing tools and training for those that are in a position to help the 55% of Americans struggling with mental health, but for whatever reason they couldn't afford mental health treatment, didn't have access to it, or plain just didn't even know where to look. And what we do is, as an organization, provide free training that teaches the everyday individual how to step in when somebody else is in crisis. And we do it through online videos and trainings, and I go speak at events as well. But the whole idea is to equip the everyday person that is your coworker at the office, your family member, your friend, to be able to step in when immediate action from a therapist or mental health professional is not available.
Yeah. So tell us what is mental health?
So I oftentimes people use mental health and mental illness in the same sentence, and mental health would be the actions that you take in both physical exertion as well as mentally, emotionally, the things that you're doing that equate to this standard of wellness or lack thereof. So mental health is really, hey, how am I functioning in the everyday world? And it's typically this scale of I'm really struggling or I'm doing really well, as opposed to mental illness, which is simply an official diagnosis we give somebody on the DSM-5 when they've got major depression or bipolar or anxiety struggles. And, if we're talking what the ideal mental health is, you're socially connected, you have a good emotional support system in the family, you've got friends, you've got a network, and you have behavioral habits that are conducive to a healthy human being, be it what you're eating, the supplementation you're taking, and really just your overall outlook of everyday life.
I think another term I've heard used is mental fitness.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what are the common things that if you're providing the resources for people on how to act or behave for someone who is suffering from a mental illness? What is it that you're mostly teaching? What is it that most people don't understand that they need to understand to be able to support?
I think the biggest thing is actually the biggest lie anyone who's struggling with severe, whether it be suicidal ideation or depression, is that individual struggling with the belief that I'm the only one and that if I'm gone, nobody's going to miss me, it won't impact things. And too oftentimes the person on the helper side is so afraid of saying the wrong thing. And oftentimes even saying the wrong thing is better than saying nothing to these people who have nobody to intervene on their behalf. And so part of what we do is correct that misconception, but what we then do is say, but if you are going to do something, we're going to equip you with the scripts of how you start a conversation with that individual without making them feel like a pariah, and then specifically how to support them as they go towards a direction of, do I need to talk to a therapist? Do I need to make some lifestyle changes in my life? Do I need just to have community and helping learn to facilitate a conversation versus the typical conversations we have in life where we're discussing with somebody and thinking of our next point? It's really that skill set of active listening, and we teach a lot about how to do that in a mental health context.
Yeah. What do you think most people get wrong about mental health? I feel like it's kind of maybe I want to say like a not a sensitive topic, it can be. What do you think most people get wrong about it?
I think they get wrong that oftentimes they don't realize that for most people, Everybody is going to struggle at some point in life. And when people get diagnosed with depression, after 6 months, most people will self-resolve on their own, provided they haven't gotten into specific bad vices to cope, i.e., alcohol, drugs,
Yeah.
you name a number of behaviors. So for a lot of people, they don't realize that like this label of depression, if I was diagnosed with depression, doesn't mean I'm always going to struggle with depression. It means
Mhm.
for this season, I'm struggling with this. And then the other part is there's so many things we can do that impact our mental health that even if we are struggling with a diagnosable depressive illness at the moment, that can move the needle for us that don't require therapy, that doesn't require expensive medications. And
Yeah.
oftentimes, I think we just rely too heavy on the medical model versus saying, what can I do? What do I have agency as an individual to move the needle for myself right now?
Yeah. I like that word agency. It's something within your control that you can then you can do. Um, what are some of the signs? So say somebody is either struggling with depression, anxiety, or whatever it is that they might be. It's something you probably want to jump on earlier rather than later, but we have to be able to recognize the signs that maybe something's going on. And hey, is this something that maybe it's just a little bit of a season that I'm going through that I need to understand how to navigate, or is this like something more serious? What are some of those early signs, and how early do they start to present themselves?
I think everybody is different. I think the signs you typically see are withdrawal or fatigue or agitation. So they can vary across the board, and there's a number of different reasons why they vary. But the bigger question is are we close enough with an individual to notice that change or shift
Yes.
in their behavior? And if we're not in community with people, and so many people aren't in community with others, that in itself, if you see someone who's disconnected and you can recognize they already don't have community, that's already a big red flag. If somebody is within community and they may be struggling a little bit or disconnected, it's leaning in to ask the question, okay, well, what steps are you taking right now for your health? Oh, do you mean you're working 80 hours a week and you don't have a date night with your wife and you don't ever see your boys that you used to see that used to build them? Well, I wouldn't feel good either, right? And
Yeah.
so it's those type of things. You will see cracks, but I think the biggest thing is we have people in our life. We all have. I have 3 kids, and they used to be in athletics. Now they're college kids and whatnot. But we have so many communities we belong to, but nobody's a really deep relationship. And so the biggest push is get in a deep relationship with 3 to 5. If you're a dude, 3 to 5 dudes that you can just be open and transparent with, and then if you're checking in regularly with these people, you'll notice a shift. But if you only talk to someone once a quarter or you have a beer with them once a month, that's not enough visibility to see. You'll never get past the small talk that happens in that instance to notice that shift.
Yeah. Yeah, I've noticed that in the men's group that I run. We meet weekly. Um, and the level and the depth of the conversations has expanded significantly from the beginning. I mean, shout out to the guys like in the beginning. Everybody was pretty open, like from the jump. But as like where we are now, the conversations are pretty deep, and it's not a surface level conversations, and to be able to have those frequently, I think is super healthy. Yeah, like you said, if you just talk to somebody once a month, it doesn't really push past that surface level conversation.
Yeah, and even they found in therapy and all the studies that just even naming the emotion out loud or having somebody help you identify that, what you're going through, actually reduces its impact on you. And so if you're a man per se and you don't have any community of brothers to be doing life with, and you're really struggling and you're not verbalizing it, nobody's doing that, you're suffering unnecessarily. Whereas even if you attended the group for a couple weeks and someone says, "Man, you sound really aggravated, frustrated. You sound like you might even be resentful about some of the things that are going on in your life." Just by naming that, you're actually reducing the stress that's causing on the individual. And so if you're a guy who doesn't have that that simple resource of having that other person to talk to, just when they name those emotions for you, is going to bring that stress level or that negative impact level down.
I picked up on one thing you said, that it sounds like some of these things, like early signs or signs of it, could be also not just in, maybe, for lack of a better word, bad things of like withdrawal, but also like, hey, you're putting your time into something else, or maybe, hey, you're avoiding going out and being social, or maybe you're spending all of that time at work and you're not addressing other things in your life. So I think that's important to like just bring to attention. It's like, hey, if you're someone who, used to be social, but now it's like, oh, I don't feel like going out, I don't feel like staying out or being, away from home or anything like those, while they might seem like good things, they can also be signs that maybe something is going on there. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. And so it's that change of behavior, but it's also, I talked to a number of guys who they, as they grew older and their network of buddies, there's always two guys that were the planners of things. Well,
Yeah.
that guy getting busy, he's now got kids, et cetera. So he's no longer the one coordinating these group efforts.
Yeah.
Well, this,
Right. That's it.
the other guy's now taking it like, I'm not being invited. So it's going on in our head when in reality the other guy just got busy. And then again, we have agency to say, oh, why don't I call the guys together? Why don't I send out the invite and do that? But sometimes you got to have that conversation with another person saying, okay, where are you pouring into your life so you have something to pour from? And and most often I find that the conversations I have with people, they're struggling because they're trying to do too many things and they think everything's critical and they have nothing being poured into them. And they've got this fear that if I stop sprinting on this treadmill, the world is going to end. And they just need somebody else to sit them and say, well, let's just take it down a notch and put some healthy steps in practice. And it moves the needle pretty effectively.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's also important to know that it's like, hey, it's not an easy process too. It's not like you just automatically, hey, find a group of people or a community that you feel like, you can pour into, but also pour back into you. It's not like it's an easy thing that just happens. Like, hey, I want this, and it shows up. It doesn't. Like, it takes a little bit of work and effort, especially maintaining friendships as we get older. Like, it certainly takes a lot of effort, almost like a relationship.
Well, yeah, and I'm assuming with your men's group, right? There are guys that are a better fit for it, and there's guys that are not as good a fit. And some of those guys may need to find a different group that
Yeah.
more aligns with them. And I think we view it too often as failure when you don't like mix with the group. But
Hmm.
I can tell you, my wife and I, when we were looking at Bible studies to join, like it literally took like six groups. She got along with all the females, but
Yeah.
I'm an entrepreneur and I have certain things that I feel driven and compelled to like say, hey, these are important things as a man. And if we're not in alignment there, I can't really gel the same way I need to with somebody, especially if I want to use it as a support network and think it. So I think it's okay to say, well, I got to just try something else. It doesn't mean anything about me. It's just like there might be a better match and keep
Yeah.
going until you
Yeah.
find that.
Yeah. Yeah. Unrealistic to think that you're going to gel with everybody that you come across. You know. And so that leads me to ask, like, what is your story? How did you get into this, and why did you get into this?
So for me, I was a competitive golfer back in high school. I got diagnosed with a rare genetic, this debilitating spinal disorder, and it basically I had these two options: major surgery that wouldn't end the pain but would stop the progression, or we're going to put you on heavy painkillers. Well, Brett Favre and I were competing for how many painkillers we had. Is that was the level it was at, and ultimately, through my process of working not only on getting recovery through that, but I realized I was medicating for some of the personal struggles I had too, some anxiety, depression. But what happened was it came to a head. I was 19 years old. I decided that I was done. I had just finished up typing up the suicide note on the computer, and I had 100 extra strength Vicodin. I was about 30 pills in, and one of my fraternity brothers happened to pop in because he wanted somebody to grab lunch with, saw what was happening, obviously got me distracted enough to get me out of the room, and then him and two other guys staged an intervention the next day because he actually had some training in that because his brother had an addiction problem. And so they staged an intervention, said, Justin, you know, you have a problem, and either you're going to go back home right now and talk to your parents about how bad this problem is, or we're going to pick up the phone and do it. We don't care, we care more about your life than we do this relationship if you're going to get upset about this. So I went home, talked about my problem. They knew how much painkillers are on. They didn't know the impact it was having on my life. And I went, detox, got clean, worked on my mental health. And then over the years, I would speak at these conferences on mental health. And then what would happen is I had two groups of people: those that were struggling with either a family member they lost to suicide or someone who's really struggling with mental health. And then on the other side were people who couldn't resonate at all with the concept of being depressed, but they wanted to help. They wanted to be of usefulness, but because they said, well, how do I speak to someone if I don't understand what they're going through? So they always said, well, I'm just going to stay back from those conversations. Long story short, I run an education company and I have access to lots of mental health experts, and enough people said, Justin, you have access to all the mental health experts and you have an education company. Why are you not building the practical training that teaches the everyday person to put this into place? And so I heard that enough, and finally we said, okay, let's get with the mental health experts, let's draft the curriculum, and then go and make it free to everybody so that there's not a financial limiter in the process. But that's kind of the 90-second version of how we got there.
Yeah. How old were you at that point?
So I was 19, 25 years ago this December, when I was attempting to take my life. But we didn't launch the nonprofit until about 18 months ago.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, when you look back on it now, like what comes up for you? Like when you think about yourself at 19, like what comes up for you?
I think a tremendous amount of grace for a kid who was lost, and didn't know, just wanted the pain to stop. At the same time, appreciation for to think that another 19-year-old kid could be mature enough to have that type of conversation with me, and so instrumental in getting me to do the right thing, the necessary thing that ultimately ends up saving my life. That's a pretty powerful thing for another 19-year-old kid, especially knowing what knuckleheads we were in college, and how we were just in general. So that was a big stretch. And then past that, it's just like realizing what I would have missed out on had I finished that process, had that door not opened at the moment it did, and going, it's Tom Hanks was being interviewed once, and he's on TV, and there's like, what's the best advice you ever got? And someone said, this too shall pass. And he says, whether you have the good times or the bad times, it's this too shall pass. And so it doesn't matter how bad your bad time is, if you stay alive long enough, there will be good times again. And I think that's kind of stuck with me, that whatever the circumstance, doesn't matter how dark, if I just stick around long enough, there's going to be good days ahead. And I don't want to miss those.
I love that frame. This too shall pass, and it's so true. Um, what was it like so as you're kind of recovering from that, like walk us through what that looked like. I can't imagine that as soon as you start down that road, like it was an easy path. There's probably so many obstacles in the way, so many, pivot points or whatever you might want to call them that really tested you. How did you stay grounded through the journey?
I think I had a group of guys that were there with me, these fraternity brothers who were all in, and they knew, um, like, hey, this guy's had the problem. He's got to stay on the straight and narrow. We're gonna make sure that stays that way. The complexity of it was, it's not like my pain went away. So I had to find even different ways to cope with the pain, what that was going to mean. And even though I was doing good things for my physical health, it meant trying to step it up to a much higher level. Even now, my routine to get physically able for the day is about a 2.5 hour routine. And that, I'm walking the dog, I'm stretching, I'm doing an hour of yoga, then 2 or 3 days a week, I'm lifting at the gym. And there's all these steps in the process just so I can function at the level I have to. And I think the biggest challenges that I faced were I'm one who's great at sprinting, but the endurance run of oh, you got to stay consistent with this for a long time.
Yeah.
I I would be the yo-yo dieter or yo-yo worker, working out cycle. And so that really was the challenge for me. How can I make it a lifestyle and say, this is just what's necessary. I have to do it. I may not ever feel great, and I may feel bad half the time, but if I stick to it, I can get to the other things that are going to be good in my life.
Yeah. And so you just use that mindset to keep you consistent. Like consistency for most people, like around anything, is the hardest. Is the hardest thing to do. Being consistent is not easy. You know, and I think, and maybe you would agree with this. It's unrealistic to think that you're always going to be consistent. But when you get off track, the biggest thing is how fast can you get back on track. Like it's okay if you're on the changing your lifestyle and say you go to the gym 4 days a week and then the next week I maybe went on vacation and you only get 1 or 2 workouts. Okay, it's like all right, well now you're home from vacation. How fast are you getting back into that routine? What is that? How quickly can you get back on it?
Yeah, 100%. And I think for me, I'm fortunate in the sense that to me, it's there's a weird thing about the week starting over again. And so
Yeah,
for
yeah,
me,
yeah,
never be there would never be a time where that reset of Monday morning wouldn't hit and I wouldn't be back on it, even if I got derailed from the structure
yeah.
that I had in place.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I agree with that because I feel the same way. I feel like, all right, if you have a bad week and then like Sunday and then Monday is like, all right, I'm back. I'm back in it. I'm back. It's a
Yeah.
fresh start. It's a new week. I don't know if that was maybe because like you grow up going to school and you go back and it's Monday, back to a school day. Like the week kind of resets and then you get the weekend. And I don't know, but I would agree with that frame. As soon as like you get Monday, it's kind of like, all right, I got another shot at this to have a great week. It's not like a continuous thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, what other stories do you have about people that you've worked with or have come across into your life that have shown great resilience with mental health?
I think part of it is seeing stories of the everyday husband who's struggling and he's trying to do all of those things and it's some of the small things like learning to say no.
Mm.
Uh, a gentleman too afraid to say no to his wife
Yeah.
while he's secretly dying inside and and then you have these conversations with him and be like, but we see the end path where you're going here and she doesn't want that for you either. You need to
Hmm.
tell her and connect those dots that if it stays like this, that's where it's headed for you. And by the way, she'll respect you more for that. So getting to see examples of that's been helpful. But also, um, there's been individuals who I field so many calls of people who are struggling in crisis, and the cool thing has been to watch them pivot from I'm struggling, I'm in crisis, and then all of a sudden, 4 months, 6 months down the road, they're circling back in with me and they've never asked the question before, like, how are you doing? How are things going for you? And all of a sudden they've gotten to realize they have agency in their own life, they're making the right steps, but now they're at a healthy enough place where they start caring about those around them and specifically those that have been there to support them. And so that's a cool little twist that I've seen happen where again, a lot of guys that I work with, that's the shift that happens, and it's like, oh, I get to be that support towards others, and by that, I'm actually being filled up, and it's given me more motivation to stay on this correct path versus how I've been. And then there's other dramatic examples of individuals who I had a gal who called me and she called me bawling. I'd spoke at this conference and there's like 500 people in the room and I forced everybody to put 988 in their cell phone, the suicide hotline and crisis hotline phone number. And then she had signed up for my training, um, and and then she calls me and she's very upset. And I said, "Why are you upset?" And she's like, "I'm so sorry, I didn't finish the training." I'm like, "You're not hurting my feelings, and I'm not understanding what's going on." And she says, "No, you don't understand. My friend, or in this case, my friend, she called me from the side of a bridge and was planning on taking her own life, and I didn't know what to do. And in that moment, I panicked because I didn't finish your training. I was only 30% through. I didn't finish. And then I remembered you forced me to put the 988 number in the phone. So I told her I was on the road and I put her on hold, swapped in the crisis hotline, and they helped me navigate this woman off of the side of this bridge, get the first responders to the location, and get this woman help. And you hear stories like that, and hear this woman. I'm like, this is a victory. I go, the fact you put the number in your phone, most people don't do
Yeah,
that. They pretend to do that, and then you were there, like you got the outcome, right?
yeah.
So stories like that, where it's like you cared enough to start the training. You may not have finished, but in that moment, you had enough of that training to realize you had that number in your phone, and now there's a person alive who you would have been attending a funeral. Good on you.
When somebody calls the so like let's take that situation for example. So the girl's on the side of the bridge. She called the crisis hotline. They answer. Like what are they doing? What is their process? How are they trying to get into, say, this person's mind to help them from not jumping?
So in the suicidal framework, what they're first trying to do is understand exactly where this person is at. Number one, do they have an intent to take their own life? Number two, do they have the method, right? Is this a now thing, or are they talking about a point in the future, 10 o'clock tonight, tomorrow, next week? If it's in the moment and this person is going to do it, they're going to go and start asking questions like, well, if you were going to do this, how would you do it? Because if the person can't articulate how they were going to take their own life, the likelihood is they're still at the cry for help stage, in most cases, meaning someone who's going to take their own life, it's usually, and the steps in their brain can happen quickly, but they usually don't go from like, I have no idea how I'm going to do it. They go, I have access to a gun, or there's this bridge, or XYZ, and they'll ask questions to kind of really gauge that. The other thing they'll be trying to do at that time is find out where this person is. And if it is one of those crisis situations, it's how can we get that person out of that area? So it could be as simple as part of the conversation, that person's on a bridge. Hey, you know what? I know you're processing a lot. Why don't you just start walking around? Tell me what you see. Okay, you're on this bridge. Can you walk over to that sign? The further we can get them away from that bridge, the better, because now they really have to make, a lot of steps back. So it's things like they're doing, and obviously each circumstance is different, but that's why those people are the experts, and they're free. But the crazy thing is, they're also available if you're just in crisis, even if you're not suicidal. They will listen to you, support you, redirect you to resources. And so, the biggest thing that most people struggling with mental health don't understand is if you can't afford a therapist, but you're in crisis, you call that number, they're going to help you and see you through it. They may spend an hour on the phone with you. And by the way, they're going to check on you the next day to follow up too. They do a great job of following up. So circumstances dictate how they operate, but they're pretty darn effective at what they do.
And that number's 988.
988.
988. Okay. Is it fair to say that, let's go back to the lady on the bridge example, that if she's on the bridge and she answers the phone, is it fair to say that she wasn't, there's probably some hesitation that she is going to do it?
No, so in this case, so like on this particular example, she was on put on hold for you when you merge a call. So
Okay.
she was still on with her friend. The friend said, I need to pull over the side of the road so I can hear you clearly. And doing that, she, in 30 seconds, said to the hotline, this is what's going on. I'm going to merge the calls in because I'm not equipped to handle this. And
Mm,
so it was just a merging and swapping of the calls, and the person was already on the phone. But
right.
that person who calls their friend from the side of a bridge, usually what I don't want to say usually, there's a there's a significant amount of times where that person is calling anticipating to get a voicemail that the person didn't pick up as a final confirmation that they didn't matter enough to pick up the phone so they could go forward with that next step. And so them calling could be that last step to say, well, I tried calling and even my friend wouldn't pick up the phone for me, even though we all are busy, we're not always sure what the emergency is, or they may send a text, etc. And sometimes nobody ever gets the call because that person has what's odd sometimes when someone is really on the edge is they actually come to peace with their decision. And so you'll start to see them in some circumstances go and be completely at calm with the decision they've made. They'll start giving away things that you'd be like, why are you giving this stuff away? It makes no sense. Certain odd behaviors that take place. And so there's a lot of moving parts, but the general idea is if somebody's in crisis and you don't know exactly what to do, or even if you do, there's no harm in calling the 988 number,
Yeah, right.
tap into the experts, right? Let's
Yeah.
guarantee the best outcome we can versus trying to wing it on our own.
And is when they're on the phone, is their goal to distract them and like get their mind off of something else instead of like being on the bridge ready to jump?
I would say the primary goal is to connect with them, is to say, you're valuable enough to have this conversation. If you're valuable enough for us to have this conversation, you're probably valuable enough to exist for a few minutes more and a few minutes more and a few minutes more. Now, they will try different techniques throughout the process to try, once they've identified like how great the risk is, but
Mm-hmm.
to get you to make a decision that gives you agency, right? Help them come to that conclusion of, oh, this may not be the disaster I think it is, and here's a very next step I can take if I want to take that step. And so what they're trying to do is move them from the edge back to somewhere where they can say, have you put all the thought into this? Have you processed this enough? Or are there alternatives you may be missing? And what a shame it would be if you hadn't exhausted these other options, and mainly because you didn't even know to ask for those options. So what they're trying to connect enough so they can figure out, do I need to redirect this person? Do I need to get someone there immediately? Do I need to just get them to get somebody else on the phone as well, or to their house so they're not alone? But that primary thing first is they got to be able to connect with them, because if you can't connect with them immediately in a way that's meaningful, they're going to think,
Yeah.
"Oh, this is obligatory. You're not really in this for me."
Yeah. Is it true that men are more susceptible to suicide than women?
There's a much higher rate of suicidal ideation amongst men, and I think there's a number of different reasons given, but I would argue that what we find most often is women have better social networks. Men, specifically middle-aged men, are struggling with a number of different things. One of which is that lack of community, and when you have that lack of community, then it kind of distorts your reality. But also with men, what we find is we all as men have big, ambitious dreams for ourselves. And about middle age is where we find out that we may not have been the person we thought we were. And so for men though, it's that ego struggle, because is it okay if I wasn't who I thought I was? And can I still be a better version tomorrow? And with men, a lot of times it's that's where that depression and that suicidal ideation comes in, is like, oh, I can't fix my marriage. Like telling my wife I did this or lost this finances, did this, and that because they have no sounding board, no other group of men to be around, they're far more likely to do something stupid than a woman who, by general rule, they talk about everything, and they have, whether it be coworkers or play dates, you name it, they're going to go and verbalize. They're much more emotionally in tune. And so, just like with men, we get angry first versus sad, and a woman will get sad first, then angry when she's tired of being sad. And so, yes, men struggle much more. I think there's a variety of different reasons for it. But if I were to say to wives everywhere, it's like make sure your man goes out once a week with his buddies. And it's a consistent, good group of dudes and not going to a club and getting hammered at a bar, and you'll do wonders for him.
Yeah. Going back to the men and feeling lonely and all that stuff. How do we know that that's true? Is it based off surveys? And if it's like surveys, who's taking these surveys? Like where are we gathering this information? How do we know that people are being honest when they're answering these surveys? Like how do we get this information? Like how do we know that this stuff is true?
Universities have spent a tremendous amount of financial capital researching these topics and doing surveys. And one of the things that happens, especially when you talk to the therapists and the psychologists, the ones that have gone through the specialty, they'll say a man is not likely to volunteer unless it's true that he is super lonely, that he feels disconnected or depressed, etc. And so when they look at the studies, what they find is there's an underreporting of symptoms because men are much more likely to want to hide that information. So, the men are actually probably underrepresented in just how big the crisis is because we don't want to do it. There's not going to be more men who want to say that the problem's bigger than it is because then again, for us men, oftentimes that ties back to our ego. And if I'm not a man who has agency and capability, then that's a rough place to be in. So the studies, there's tremendous ones out there, and they're coming out all the time. Um, and when you talk to the therapist, hey, is it underrepresented, overrepresented? Without a doubt, they all say the same thing: is amongst men, it is underrepresented just how bad the problem is because they don't want to open up. They're afraid of this not being anonymous. They're afraid of if I vocalize that I have this struggle, do I now own it? What happens then? I'm better just pushing through.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. Where do you go to find these studies? Where can people go to if they wanted to see them or?
There's across, so, there's the Institute of Mental Health. There's a number of organizations across the country that are actually supplying these studies now. But you could even, these days, because of how good the language models are, you could even say, give me the top 10 studies on men's mental health that have been released in the past 18 months. And they'll give you the published studies, not just from low respected medicine journals, but from like top respected journals that are publishing this information. So it's very readily available.
And when we talk about men, is there like certain groups of men or types of men? Is it a certain like personality or like when we categorize men in this group, like what type of men are they? Are they the high performing like CEO type guys? Or are they the entrepreneurs? Or are they, the guys who sit at a desk all day? Or are they laborers? Like who? What type of was it pretty even amongst all of them? Like, what types of men are suffering from this?
Two groups specifically that the data supports a strong problem. Number one is married men in late 30s, early 40s. And that's due to when you look at divorce rate in this country and the impact that has, it's no shocker that that's there. There's financial consequences for that, but there's also those consequences of, oh, I didn't turn out to be who I thought I was and time's running out on me, right? They think at
Yeah.
44 years old, time's running out. The other group, the more concerning one for me at the moment, is those young men aged 17 to 22, 23 who have grown up in the age of social media, are looking at comparison of these guys who are doing so well and these influencers, but also so many of them became these keyboard warriors or video game players, and they didn't go out and conquer things in the real world. They tended to just, oh, I won on Fortnite or some other game, and that's where they get their shallow victories. Or, and then they end up in this doom scrolling loop. So those two groups are where it's really strong. And then you also have those that there's a thing called failure to launch. The 24 to 30 group, there's a strong correlation between those that are still living in their parents' home. And there's a lot of young men who we went from, let's say, my father's generation, who like the parents are like, "You're gone all day, go kill it, go crush it," and you make a life for your family. You have responsibility. Don't sit around. I was raised that way. But this next generation where everyone gets a trophy and the parents shield them from any real struggle or consequences, what then ends up happening is they have this idealized version of what life should be like when they graduate high school, graduate college. And when all of a sudden it's not that easy, they get disaffected. And so they prefer to stay a child versus risk being a man and failing.
Yeah, that's something that I've thought about a lot recently is, what are we doing as a culture or society to initiate boys into manhood? Like, what does that initiation process look like? I mean, just take, for example, like back if you were in like tribal, it was like you had to kill something or you had to, whatever it might be. Um, and like, what is that thing for young men today? What is that initiation into into malehood?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting you mentioned that. I think it differs by, what the makeup of your father is. Do you have a father figure even in the home? There's a lot of kids,
Mm-hmm.
when you see your dad every other weekend, he's not there to be an influence, and he may not be a good influence. He may not be around for a good reason. But also there's things that we used to learn, like for example, everyone used to know how to change a tire and change their oil.
Yeah.
Nobody knows how to do that anymore. And everyone used to know how to drive stick shift. They don't know how to do that. And so there's certain things, and some may not be practical because they're not necessary anymore. But I
Mm-hmm.
think it's
Sure.
those things where I heard Jordan Peterson once say, the second your kid is able to do something for themselves on their own, never do it for them again. So the second they're able to make their own bed, going forward, they always make their bed. As soon as they're able to wash their own clothes,
That's
those type of things build confidence and competence and going, wait a second, I'm doing this executive functioning that the adults are doing, and that is one way to kind of take them towards manhood outside of taking them on the boys' trip, etc.
yeah. That's pretty good right there. That's pretty good. I guess another thing that I've been thinking a lot about is so my wife and I are watching the show Outlander, and um, I guess to a point, and it's based in like the 1740s through like almost like the American Revolution, and it's funny you're watching. It's like, okay, well, what did the guys do? Well, they got the slant. All right, well, he's building a house, and maybe he's going to get food, and that's that's really about it. Like you spend all day either building your shelter and then helping other people either build their shelter, and on top of that, you had a large sense of purpose or something you put yourself that was bigger than yourself. Was like they were always either trying to stay alive because there was a war going on, like physically, just survival was the only thing because there was war, and so it was something that you gave yourself up greater to, which was like to serve your country or well, whatever your clan or whatever it was, and then shelter and food. And now today it's like, okay, well, what is it that greater purpose that a lot of people have? It's not what is it? It's not that like we all have to sit here and prepare to go to war. We don't have to hunt, fight for our food. We're not building our houses. It's just it's so different. And most guys now either scrolling on their phone or watching TV or addicted to video games or whatever. And like watching the differences of like what's going on now with men versus like what's going on there, and they got together at like church or they were working together building the house or on the farm or whatever. Like they needed each other, and so it's interesting watching the different dynamics of like masculinity.
Well, and I'll take it in a slightly adjacent direction. So I do a lot of work over in Uganda. I have an organization, we build water wells over there. And when they knew I was starting this mental health thing, they were struggling to understand the concept. So over in Uganda, especially in the tribal regions, right, like they're the poorest of the poor. But what would happen is that because we're such an individualistic society in America, we want to do things on their own. There are victories, etc. When you don't know your neighbors down the street, so when you're struggling, like no one's coming over to proactively check in with you. In
Yeah.
Uganda, if someone loses a family member, right, not only does there a massive deal about the loss of the family member, but it is just assumed that that person is going to be limited in a work capacity for some time, and everyone in the village is going to shoulder a portion of that load, and that is an obligation. And if you don't do that, if you don't jump in to support that individual, you literally are shunned from the
Yeah.
village. It is an obligation of how you live. And so for them, they say, like, well, why would you ever get so depressed if you've got all this support? And I'm like, the support is different in America. For all the blessings we have and services and amenities we have, we're lacking that community. And so it's not just hate. We've lost the things that traditionally transfer boys into manhood, but we become more individualistic as a society. Whereas those that still have this community aspect of it, you have an obligation to that, like you said, that greater good, that community. And by the way, if you're not available because you're just, playing on video games or whatnot over in a tribal village, not that they'd be on video games, but if you're messing around, you're harming the collective. And by the way, that's not a value we agree with. And so what you see is a lot less depression over there, despite circumstances being far worse than they over
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. That's yeah. So how do we fix it?
I, if it were me, I would make sure every employer made sure that their employees were connected. They had a group to go to. Specifically, I think every guy should be in a guy's group, a girl should be in a girl's group. And this is not saying religious affiliation or anything, but it's just like you need a tribe to belong to outside of your profession and outside your daily home life. And then past that, um, the more of us that are open and honest about our struggles, right? It's the odd thing that for whatever reason our pride tells us, I don't want to share my weakness. But all of us, when we hear that guy who we thought was super strong open up and be vulnerable, we're all inspired by it. None of us are like rejecting the individual. We all think it's really cool. And so the more those people that can stand up at companies and say, by the way, me too, I struggled with this. And by the way, I was angry at God and I was angry at my wife and I was angry at my circumstance. But in reality, I was just scared because I hadn't amounted, right? And the more those conversations happen, I think the better off we are. And then it comes down to we're a overweight society that doesn't
Yeah.
exercise, doesn't eat
Exercise.
well,
Yeah.
right? And you go, 30 minutes a day walking reduces depression by 25%, clinical depression by 25%. And you're like, you have access to a sidewalk, and
Yeah.
yet we'll pay for a drug that may or may not do something. And again, I was on medication for years, and I have no problem with that. But those type of things are actively available to us. Things like in your gut biome, right? That's where most of the serotonin's created. So if you're eating crap fast food all day, guess what's going to happen?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's those type of things. But the biggest thing is the community, making sure everybody is in community. And if you're somebody who feels you're stable and you don't have a group, be the group host. Get that group of dudes together, and it'll be worth your while, and it'll give you something else to do and aspire to grow into than just looking out for your own.
Yeah. Justin, thank you. Thank you for what you do and helping people. Is there anything we didn't talk about today or touch on that you feel like we should have?
The only thing that I would love to just say is that if you're looking for resources on how to step in, our training is free for everyone. It's first name, last name, email on project55.org. And we give 14 real life tactical scenarios of depression, death, financial crisis, and the list goes on. And we make a paint by numbers approach available to everyone. And even if you don't go through that training, we have resources available. So if you're looking to get that type of training, it's on our website. It's absolutely free. We'll never market anything else towards you. And other than that, if you're listening, put the 988 number in your phone. You never know when that person's going to reach out. And 98% of this country does not have it on their phones. And now they are starting, because of lobbying, to make it mandatory on all student ID cards for high schools because it
Oh
has been
wow.
that instrumental in saving lives.
Wow. Yeah. And I guess I'll just add The 988 isn't just for suicide; it could be for anything. So they're there to support, and because we do know some of those rehab or whatever are unbelievably expensive, and so that 988 number is a great resource to just have in your back pocket because you never know when you might need it.
Absolutely.
Where can people, you just touched on it a little bit, where can people go to find you and stay up to date with everything you're doing other than your website? Do you have socials that you use?
Yeah, mostly because we focus so much on the workforce. You can find me on LinkedIn or organization Project 55 on LinkedIn on the socials. Otherwise, it's project55.org. We do have an online community for that within the website as well. And if anyone listening ever connects with me or wants to ask additional questions, happy to answer, happy to redirect towards resources, whatever I can do to support.
Awesome. Thank you, Justin. I'll make sure to link all of that in the show notes. That way people feel inclined to reach out or take a look that they can.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
No, thank you, Justin.